In tropical climes there are certain times of day when all the citizens retire to take their clothes off and perspire. It's one of those rules the greatest fools obey, because the sun is far too sultry and one must avoid its ultraviolet ray. The natives grieve when the white men leave their huts, because they're obviously, definitely nuts. Mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday sun. The Japanese don't care to. The Chinese...
Sunbathing is such a crazy pastime when you think about it. Our bodies don't really need the sun's heat. On the contrary, we have to protect ourselves from overexposure. But for another basker on the beach, it has a real purpose. For this reptile, soaking up the sun's heat is the only way it can raise its body temperature. Despite the dependence on external sources of heat, reptiles are found over a wide geographical range and in almost every type of environment. Although they are most plentiful in the tropics, some are found at colder latitudes. The garter snake approaches the Arctic Circle. And there are lizards that are found at high altitude. This one survives the extreme climate of the Andes. Can the body temperature of these so-called cold-blooded creatures really be at the mercy of the environment, surging up and down as conditions change? To find out, we have to analyze the thermoregulatory behavior of reptiles in their natural habitat. A good habitat for studying temperate reptiles is found in southeastern Spain. It's here that Peter Davies of Nottingham University does his fieldwork, and on this trip, David Robinson of the Open University has gone along with him.
It's a bit windy this afternoon, but I think we might find someone. A wall. Yes, there's one. Trouble is with wind, it tends to billow the twine out and make it difficult to give a short, sharp pull. You've got to get this over its head. Got him. Well, the body temperatures of wild lizards, of course, are tricky to measure, because as soon as you catch a lizard and start handling it, its body temperature will change. And we've developed a technique which requires that the body temperature be measured within 30 seconds of capturing them. We use this quick registering thermometer, which is specially designed to measure temperatures quickly. It's a mercury thermometer, and with a narrow stem, which can be inserted in the cloaca of even quite small lizards. A little bit of air in it. That's it. They can stay in those for quite some time. Oxygen does diffuse in and out.
A large number of lizards need to be sampled to work out the pattern of body temperature change. There's no shortcut to this kind of fieldwork. As well as taking measurements of body temperature throughout the day, they need to take air temperature and the temperature of objects in the environment to get a true picture of the thermal niche. Measurements of air temperature in this part of Spain in April show a daytime average of around 15 to 20 degrees centigrade. Body temperature measurements of wall lizards give a consistently higher reading than that of air temperature during much of the day. This could suggest that the lizards have some control over their body temperature. But to be sure, we must compare body temperature simultaneously with ambient temperature. For an animal incapable of regulation, we'd expect body temperature to coincide with ambient, following what's called an isothermal line. For perfect regulation, body temperature would remain constant at a particular temperature. For our wall lizards, we find that data taken on a sunny day fall between the two lines. The regression line through these 2 points implies a considerable degree of regulation. we can see how effectively lizards regulate in the laboratory. Here we have the common British lizard, a close relative to the one being studied in Spain. Its body temperature is being measured continuously by means of a very fine thermistor placed inside its cloaca. At 16 degrees centigrade, it's still cold from the night before, but it's free to move under the heat shining down from the infrared lamp. Through an infrared camera, we will be able to see any heat changes. At the moment, the lizard appears black, showing how cold it is against the hotter, whiter substrate. The temperature gradient is more noticeable if we colour the picture. The hottest area is the red area in the middle, with zones of decreasing temperature towards the edge. The lizard is the colour of the coldest temperature zone, but notice the tip of its tail is gradually merging with the background as it begins to warm up. Having chosen its spot, the lizard flattens its body to bask. In this way it can absorb maximum heat from above and below. And the more heat it absorbs, the more the lizard's body disappears in the infrared gradient. In only a few minutes, its body temperature has risen through 15 degrees to nearly 32 degrees centigrade, showing how rapidly its body can absorb heat. In fact, the feet and tail of our lizard reappear, showing that they are now hotter than the substrate. Lizards often choose the same temperature zone for basking in such experiments. It could suggest there's a compromise between the speed of heating up and the discomfort of exposure to heat that's too intense. A lizard's net absorption of heat is affected by various factors in its natural environment. When cold, it warms up by absorbing solar radiation, not only directly but indirectly by reflection from dust in the air and objects such as rocks. If the ground beneath the lizard is warmer, then the lizard gains heat energy by conduction. But it also loses energy by convection in a breeze and by evaporation of water from its lungs and skin. Energy absorbed from the sun is re-radiated in the infrared. The amount of heat exchange depends on the relative temperatures of the lizard and other objects. If the lizard is cooler than the sunlit rock, then it receives more energy from radiation than it loses. Similarly, if the radiative temperature of the sky is lower than the lizard, then more radiant energy is lost by the lizard. Size and colour are also important. Small lizards warm up faster than large ones, and dark skins absorb heat better. Finally, the rate of heat absorption is affected by basking position and posture. These can make large differences to the amount of heat falling on its body. The radiant heat gained is proportional to the size of the shadow cast, and indeed relatively small changes allow the lizard to control the speed and intensity of warming up. But why do lizards bother to raise their body temperature at all? One answer seems related to feeding. When it's cold, the lizard is lethargic. Even placing a juicy mealworm under its nose doesn't induce it to feed. At higher temperatures, the lizard is not only able to move quickly to capture prey, but at these temperatures its digestive enzymes work most efficiently. So it's beneficial for lizards to raise their body temperature at certain times. Do they do this periodically by shuttling between sun and shade, or is there a more subtle form of temperature control? Back in the laboratory, we can test the degree of control that they can achieve in a device known as a shuttle box. The box has two compartments. A supply of hot water keeps one at around 55 degrees centigrade, and the other side is kept cold at around 4 degrees centigrade by a flow of ice-cold water. This lizard is a desert iguana. As before, we'll measure its body temperature using a thermistor inserted into its cloaca. The high temperature doesn't seem to bother the lizard at first, but as its body temperature rises, we notice changes in posture to minimize contact with the hot surface, and gaping, another means of losing heat. But to avoid becoming too hot or cold, it must shuttle between the compartments. We set up a chart recorder to measure the temperature range over which the movements between compartments occurred. The body temperature of the lizard rises to a maximum before it shuttles from the hot to the cold side, and similarly, body temperature drops to a minimum before the lizard returns to the hot side again. The pattern continues with a cycle time of 5 to 10 minutes in this case, but it would depend on the size of the animal. The oscillations in body temperature are around a mean value of 40 degrees centigrade in this lizard, but it has a sharper and more consistent response to temperature on the hot side of the box than on the cold side. And that's not surprising, because for this desert iguana, precise regulation at high temperatures is essential. It maintains one of the highest body temperatures of any vertebrate, coming out when the desert is at its hottest. At 40 degrees centigrade, its body temperature is within just a few degrees of its lethal limit. And it's lethal because the desert sand gets hot enough to fry any animal protein. For desert animals that are active at these temperatures, the problem is how to avoid overheating. It pays to keep surface contact to a minimum. Some reptiles avoid the heat by burrowing. Skinks find lower temperatures just a few millimeters below the surface. This particular one is found in Spain, where even in a temperate climate, sand surface can be very hot.
That's nice. That's a sand skink, Pedriaga's skink. It lives under stones. We've never found it anywhere else. Very nearly limbless, you notice. Tiny little limbs. You got that?
Yes,
wall lizard?
Wall lizard here.
Well, that makes quite an interesting comparison. This lizard, in the laboratory, put in a gradient, regulates its body temperature with some precision. Their body temperatures vary, but within a narrow range. In the laboratory, the skink seems to be a very precise thermoregulator, like the wall lizard. When you go into the field, the wall lizard and the skink from the same habitat, both come from around here, are very different. And the reason is obvious. The wall lizard regulates precisely because it comes out and basks. The skink can't do this because it never comes out and basks and spends its time under these stones and comes up and down in the substrate to the warm rock to maintain body temperature, but can't do that with such precision. So this is a very important illustration of the principle of matching physiological experiments in the laboratory with field observations. Without that, the impression would have been that you had here a thermal specialist in the skink, where in fact it's a thermal generalist.
It's a very interesting example, that, isn't it, of how if you just looked at the physiological measurements, you get quite the wrong impression.
It is indeed.
The gecko in the same habitat lives yet another lifestyle. Here we find it basking in broad daylight, but it's known to be nocturnal and active at the much lower temperatures of early evening.
It actually took us quite a while to find these habitats of the geckos at night. We've seen them a lot on the walls during the day, basking, and looking very black, contrasted with the dry stone walls, but at night they're much more difficult to find, at least at first. And then we began looking around the town, looking around the hotels, and began to find them.
This is a likely looking place, isn't it?
Yes, you often find them here. These protected porches are good habitats, you know. There's one. There's one.
Yes, up in the
You
corner
see it?
there.
Yeah.
So it'll stay still, won't it, if we
Yep. I don't
keep
think
the
that'll move.
torches on it for a
Yeah.
while?
No, there's quite a lot of insect life about. Yeah, there's a moth. There's a centipede up there too. Whether they'll eat centipedes or not, I have no idea. But quite a lot of insect life does appear under these porches, and I think that probably is the heat bringing them in too. I wonder what the locals think of this kind of expeditions of wandering around looking sinister at night. This doesn't look a too safe building, but I think it's all right if we keep on the ground floor. It's actually falling to pieces rather rapidly. It's a good place, I think. The trouble is, the geckos are very difficult to actually catch. There's one. Oh, a rather nice one. All right, Dave, will you hold
take
this?
the torch.
Yeah, keep the beam right on him. Got him. Oh, he's nice, little chap. Not a very big one. All right.
You got something to put in?
Let's get a shot at his body temperature. He feels quite cold. Can you hold that?
Yes.
Having a go at biting me, yes? Yes, he's 19. Now that's a lowish temperature for an active reptile. See how pale he is? Direct contrast to the ones on the walls during the day.
Yes, they were really black, weren't they?
Hmm. He's got his mouth around my finger.
Presumably he'll not be basking, as it were, on the hot walls much longer.
No, I think he'll be out for perhaps another hour and then away.
The next morning, our gecko is still pale and cold. At this body temperature, you can see how well camouflaged it is against the rocks. By darkening its skin, it increases its heat gain, but becomes more conspicuous to predators. So, presumably, the advantages of being at high temperatures for part of the day must outweigh the risk. Another habitat we visited is a river valley a few miles inland, where Peter studies a water-loving reptile.
But strangely, in the spring, waters can be quite cold, and yet these animals are in the water much of the day and much of the night.
And how common is common?
Well, there was one there.
Yeah.
The viperine snake has a different set of temperature problems from the other reptiles we've looked at in Spain.
What we're trying to do is to find out something about the temperature experiences of these animals, which after all are quite extreme. At one moment they're basking on the side, raising their body temperature to something like 27, 28 degrees centigrade. At another moment they're plunging into water which may be at 13 or 14 degrees centigrade, and that's quite a drop for a reptile. This means that metabolism and all kinds of other physiological and biochemical processes are being affected. There's one. No, it's a beautiful female. Now, one of the intriguing questions about this animal is why go to all that trouble to raise your body temperature when you spend so much time in the water at low temperatures? The answer to that is a complicated one, but I think in the short term, the answer has to do with the advantages of being at a high temperature, even for a short period of time. 15?
TW 15 degrees. You want to do the air temperature?
Yep. Shared air temperature. In the long term, The answer has to do with the evolutionary inheritance. After all, this animal is a reptile, and almost all reptiles enjoy being at a high temperature. But given that, it's entirely conceivable that a reptile might evolve the capacity to prefer and to grow and to develop normally at the temperatures of the water in which it spends most of its time. This doesn't seem to be the case. They spend a lot of time at this temperature, something like 13 or 14 degrees centigrade, in the spring at any rate, and yet come out and spend relatively short periods of time basking. And I think the reason for that is that processes like growth, gonad development, proceed faster, and in general it's to the advantage of an animal like a snake to grow fast and to develop its gonads quickly. It spends as much time as it can in the circumstances at these high temperatures in order to foster rapid growth, rapid development.
For reptiles, then, the advantages of high body temperatures seem to be faster rates of feeding, metabolism, and development. The degree to which they can and do exploit high temperatures varies, as we've seen in our Spanish field study. The wall lizard is the most prodigious regulator. When it's active, it keeps its body temperature within a narrow range of 4 degrees. It's a thermal specialist. The skink has a much wider range, fluctuating over 13 degrees. In contrast to the wall lizard, it's a thermal generalist. Whereas the gecko, which we found active both in the day and at night, looks to be a thermal generalist with a range of 11 degrees. In fact, it behaves like a thermal specialist during the day, keeping a body temperature similar to the wall lizard. The snake is a generalist with the widest daytime range. Its upper temperature, in common with the others, is around that of a mammal. But unlike a mammal, it's active at very low body temperatures. We photographed it at night, swimming in water as cold as 12 degrees centigrade. As we've seen, it's during the day that reptiles exert a much greater degree of control over their body temperature than biologists at first thought possible. And they do so much more economically than mammals, because instead of burning food at high cost, they bask in the free energy of the sun.
Deplores this foolish habit. In Hong Kong, they strike a gong and fire off a noonday gun to reprimand each inmate who's in late. In the mangrove swamps by the python rumps, there is peace from 12 to 2. Even caribous lie around and snooze, for there's nothing else to do. In Bengal, to move at all is seldom if ever done. But mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday, 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 out in the midday sun.